Today I'm going to be analysing a collection of 4 music festival lanyards. I'll be analysing the Glastonbury 2014 Music Festival lanyard, the V Festival 2007 lanyard, the 2013 Creamfields Music Festival lanyard, and finally the BBC Radio 1's Hackney Weekend 2012 lanyard. Throughout all of these I'll be pointing out some key factors that I feel will be of interest to my project, and I'll be pointing out some strengths and weaknesses and some factors that I feel will be of relevance to my final artifact. So here I'm just going to show you the Glastonbury 2014 Festival lanyard to begin with. First of all, we see a very iconic visual design of the programme with the pyramid stage and colours being used with the typography of the design on the front and the back. And we also see the sponsors information, which is the Guardian newspaper, just here. Overall, I kind of like the visual presentation to begin with, and this is quite an important factor to bear in mind for the creative side of event organisers and what they want from their festival programme in terms of visual presentation. So moving inside the lanyard, we have a personal greeting from the event organisers, which is quite an important thing to note because it sort of brings the whole festival down to a personal level. We also have sponsors' messages here and advertising for Greenpeace and WaterAid as well. So it's important to note that they're going to want some sponsor messages in these programmes. We have some information on some acts and what to expect from the festival, and some further sponsor messages here. I need to sort of take into consideration how people are going to feel about all these sponsored messages. Like, is this going to be quite an annoying thing to come across in a programme? The answer is probably most likely, so that's something to bear in mind in terms of the user experience for these programmes. So now the programme sort of gives some outline as to what sort of acts to expect, the big acts to expect here. So this is named Bill Toppers, which is quite funny. So you've got all these main acts who are going to be performing, and so the programme's obviously just trying to outline these and push these names for the audiences. The same thing applies to these pages here. And we also have pages that are outlining acts based on their genre. So that's quite important for music festival goers who have sort of particular tastes in music. And here the programme sort of outlined that. And so yeah, that's important to note. So in terms of acts, it's important to note the genre of acts as well. So moving on, we've also got information regarding not just the acts, but other events that are going to be occurring at the festival. Just other events that are going on that could be of interest to users. So it's not all about the music and the music acts. So moving on, we can see the beginning of the day programme. And what I've noticed is that the days are colour-coded, and they are presented first of all in this sort of calendar format, so users can sort of spot any clashes. So it's all really well organised in terms of time, which is quite good. It's very well visually communicated. However, the names are pretty small, so basically it's quite hard to point out sort of these acts on such a small programme, and because of the size of this programme they're trying to fit all this information into just a couple of pages that really aren't that big. But along with this presentation of all the acts, you've also got a list presentation of the acts the stage and time all separated out. And this is very hard to read, if I'm honest, and I wouldn't be happy if I purchased this program, and I don't have very good eyesight, so viewing this would be quite difficult. So that's something to bear in mind. Yeah, there's more sponsored messages here going on through the program at intervals. So as we can see, the next day is a different colour, and we see the same format of the calendar presentation and the list format as well here, so the users can view it in different formats, which is probably a good thing. Now, in the middle of the program here, we've actually got a pull-out map with a key regarding all the event information that you can just see there, and so that's quite important to note. We've got two versions of the map. We've got a small version of the map, well, that's basically encompassing the whole area and surrounding areas like car parks and whatnot. And then we've actually got a more focused version of the event area, which gives it a little bit more detail. For such a small lanyard, it's quite hard to read, so that's why they've taken that into consideration. So moving on to the next day, we have Saturday, and we have the same format and structure of presentation for the days going through. And Saturday seems to be quite a busy day, filled with a lot of acts, and then the same applies for Sunday. Different colour, different day, but the same structure applies for the calendar format and the list format of acts. Now at the back of the lanyard we've got an A to Z presentation of all acts. So if you have a select artist you want to find, you can find it in this index format, which I think is quite important to note. It's quite a good way of just finding the acts that you want, all the acts that are going to be performing at the festival. The same applies here, so it's just a couple of pages of that. And then we also have essential information. So this encompasses like emergency services, lost property, etc. And we've also got information regarding food as well. So we've got Glasto, Grub, like there's textual information on potential food stands that are going to be in the festival that users should check out. Obviously this is the end of the program. We've got a simple sponsored message just to end the program off, but overall this program is very rich in content for the size you're given. Like most lanyards are pretty big, but what they've done here is they've given you something that's essentially quite small, and all the information is really well structured, which of course is what they've had to do for encompassing a lot of information, something so small. But in my personal opinion, I think this is probably just a bit too small for its users, and if I purchased this I probably wouldn't be that happy with it, because reading the acts in here is going to be quite a challenge if you haven't got very good eyesight like me. So now I'm going to be showing you the 2007 V Festival programme. It's quite a big programme, a lot bigger than the Glastonbury Music Festival programme. I like the visual identity and the branding that we see here of V Festival, and there's evidence of the event organisers sort of presenting some sort of creative flair with some visual graphics and design visuals, which is important to note because all event organisers are going to want to have that creative intention for their programmes. So opening up the lanyard, we have some sponsored messages, and we've also got the information displayed upside down. So obviously when the person is using this program they're going to flip through it with the actual strapping on their neck. So that's important to note, because the way in which this is designed, we've got the visual branding of the event still on each page going through, and we are presented with first of all the actual stage name, then the day and time, so the date, and there's actual branding for the stage as well, which is important to note. So they're going to want to brand each stage, and the way in which the timing has been organised, it's been organised in chronological order, going from the start of the day to the end of the day, going, so it's from the bottom up. And finally, for each page, they've actually also written text here which says running times are correct at the time of going to press. So at the time this lanyard was pressed, printed, these dates were obviously accurate. However, this is kind of a bad thing to tell the user, because basically what it's saying is these dates could change, but there's nothing they can really do about it, which is kind of bad, really. So it's not very reassuring for the user. So on one side we've got the Saturday time, and then as you flip down on the other side you've got the next day, which is quite a good way of presenting the entire lanyard as you go through, and that's quite a typical thing you see with lanyards and the way they're designed. So going through each day we see the same thing with the stages being branded, and there's some commercial branding for each stage, and so the same format follows on throughout the whole thing, and we end with a few sponsored messages here, and finally the map, which is on the back. So if I show you that, you can sort of see it as it having like a nice key with some icons and the branded stage information. Overall, I think that's quite important to consider event sponsors and branding overall for these festival lanyards, because that's where festivals get their funding, is via commercial sponsorships. So I'm going to have to find a way to sort of incorporate that into my artifact, and to allow for that input from event organisers. So basically I need to allow them to input their sponsor information, and also the way in which they've organised the acts in this festival lanyard is sort of typical to what you'd normally find like music festivals, which I think is quite important to note. So the structure here is pretty typical, really, of having your stages and the stage name, and the date, and then the chronological order of the acts. So here we have the Creamfields Music Festival lanyard from 2013. First of all, the event branding is quite significant at the start of the lanyard, so it sort of makes it official. So it's quite an important thing to note, considering the logo and the colour scheme that goes along with it as well. So opening here we have obviously sponsored messages to open with, which is sort of similar to the previous lanyard that we'd seen with the V Festival lanyard. So considering sponsored messages is obviously quite a key thing to consider now. It's obviously, we can see here it's organised by the day, time, and the stage name and the act times, which are ordered chronologically from the bottom up. The running times are basically okay, but however there's no real act information, so if I wanted to find out about what each of these acts are, that it's not really well presented here, so there's no act information whatsoever, which is sort of the same thing that we saw with the previous lanyards. So finding out about acts is not so good. And at intervals, again, we have sponsored messages going through the lanyard, and we also have the branding of sponsors as well, just at the bottom of each page, which is quite an important thing to note as well. So yeah, at the bottom of each page there is that branding. So just going through this entire lanyard, we see the sort of same. We have the stage names and the event acts all ordered chronologically from the bottom up. And again, more sponsor messages, but this time it's to do with the actual event itself. And considering sponsoring for tickets as well is something that's quite important. So there's quite a lot of commercial value that these lanyards hold for each festival organisation. And yeah, we also have merchandising, advertising for the event as well. So considering sponsorship information is quite key for lanyards, and what these things are going to hold in terms of information, it's becoming quite obvious now what categories they are. And finally, this lanyard presented a really detailed design of the map, so in a sort of 3D perspective with a really good key. So basically these festivals can come up with very good designs for maps that are 2D and that work really well. They don't have to be interactive, because I personally was able to use this map really well when I was at the event. But I think overall this lanyard needs to provide more information on the acts at the festival, because when I was there it seemed kind of vague most of the time about what acts I was seeing, which is obviously a shame. I would have liked to have found out more about them. And this sort of applies to all festivals that I've analysed so far. So finally here we have the BBC Radio 1 Hackney Weekend lanyard from 2012. This is part of the BBC Radio 1 Big Weekend series that they do every year. It's quite important, obviously, for every lanyard that I've seen so far to have the branding on the front of the lanyard. This is what sort of makes it official. So this is something important to consider. This is what they're going to want. They're going to want their branding over their lanyards. Similar to the Glastonbury lanyard, we're presented with a welcome message from the event organisers. Sort of makes it more personal, and it's like a greetings message. So it's important to have that in there somewhere, maybe to consider for each festival. But of course, same as the V Festival lanyard, they have presented the acts upside down so that when the person's viewing it, it's sort of more user-friendly. So on each page we've got the branding, and then we've also got the stage name and the acts in order chronologically, but this time it's from the top down, not from the bottom up. I'm not too sure which works best really, but in my personal opinion I think this method's probably better because people read from the top down like a book anyway, so it's probably best to do it in that order. So going through the programme, on each page every stage has its own brand or name, so that's also something that I need to consider for sort of segregating each stage in the design. Now they've come up with something really interesting here. This is called the BBC Radio 1 Hackney Weekend Clash Finder. So the way in which they've actually laid it out is that they've done like a schedule format, so people can go along and find what acts clash with what, which I think is quite an important thing to note really, because if you are sort of scheduling your own acts, you need to sort of find out what acts clash with what, and it's going to be quite an important thing to consider for preferred acts clashing with each other. People are going to want to make custom versions of this, so laying it out in this format is almost essential to consider. So at the end of this lanyard we've just got some final sponsored messages, and then followed by again more merchandising for the festival. And finally we have the map at the back, which is really well presented in like a flat design, showing every stage and the icons for certain essential areas to go to. So yeah, this is an important thing to consider. They've been able to encompass pretty much everything, so these maps don't necessarily need to be interactive for every festival. They can be designed as just a simple image or graphic, as we see here.